This channel is part of the History Hit network.
This is Ermine Street, the road built by the invading Roman forces as they swept north in the 1st century AD. The conquering legionaries established a base here at Ancaster in Lincolnshire shortly after the invasion, and there was a continued Roman presence here for the next 4 centuries. There's evidence of Roman life everywhere around here. Just round the corner there's a cemetery where they've discovered over 250 Roman burials, including 11 stone sarcophagi. And these finds, all discovered by local people, coins, brooches, this lovely statue of the goddess Minerva, are evidence of what an affluent town it was. But then something weird happened at the end of the 3rd century. This established town suddenly decided it needed to build a big defensive wall around its centre. Why? Time Team have got just 3 days to find out. It's a wet, and I mean very wet, start to day one. Geophysics and our diggers are battling gale-force winds and torrential rain as we set about uncovering the history of Roman Ancaster. And the man we have to thank for this rather bracing dig is our Roman expert, Guy de la Bedouillere. Guy, you've brought us to the epicentre of the worst weather in Britain today.
Nonsense. This is warm for Lincolnshire.
What is it about this place that is so exciting to you?
Well, we moved here about a year ago, and my younger son, went to the primary school, and I couldn't believe it when the head teacher started showing me all the Roman finds that have come up from all around here. But the strange thing is, Ancaster is not really very well recorded, so we know very little about what sort of place this really was.
Previous excavations do tell us a wall and ditches went up around Roman Ancaster in approximately 280 AD. Why, though, is another matter, and the theories range from the purely defensive to a status symbol built by an increasingly affluent population. But just about everything inside this walled area is now either built on or scheduled. Are we going to be stymied by the fact that we can't dig the walls?
Now, the scheduled area is the sort of walled area in the middle, but it's quite clear it goes either side of that at least, and so there's lots to do.
We're just outside the wall here, as Mick said, and it's absolutely stuffed with Roman finds. I mean, literally, you can just stand, look at the ground and pick bits,
It's all over the
up,
place.
just like this, you know? It's literally as easy as that. And what's shown up so far is that there seems to be a cluster of very dense artefacts, and then a bit of a gap, and then another cluster, and then a bit of a gap. So what is going on here outside the town?
History Hit is like Netflix, just for history fans, with exclusive history documentaries covering some of the most famous people and events in history just for you. Our extensive catalogue of documentaries covers everything from the rise of Hannibal Barca to the illustrious treasures of King Tut. So sign up today for broadcast quality documentaries uncovering the mysteries of the ancient world. We're committed to bringing history fans award-winning documentaries and podcasts that you cannot find anywhere else. Sign up now for a free trial, and Odyssey fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code Odyssey at checkout.
So we've decided to concentrate on 2 sites outside the walled town. Carenza will be in charge of this wheat field to the east, which our rain-sodden diggers have started to field walk. Meanwhile, we're off to the other side of town, where Phil is already digging just outside the churchyard. Previous excavations have established a large Roman cemetery here, while our early geophys results indicate a lot of activity.
Yeah, there's your end, look. When the church extended the churchyard some years ago to put more burials in, they actually came across more burials, Roman burials. Anyway, this Roman cemetery had, you turn left here,
Yeah.
it's a bit slippy on this mud as well.
A bit.
This cemetery had stone sarcophagi in it.
So what does that indicate about period?
Well, that really means that it should be late Roman. They should be Christian by then, because earlier on they have a lot of cremation, of course. But the other thing is that field also has a lot of domestic activity in it.
What do you mean?
Well, settlements, houses. Turn left here.
Yeah.
So there's a dating problem, of course. You know, which comes first. Turn right here where these chaps are. We've got a big mat here across the entrance. So, can we see anything of the cemetery? Can we see anything of the civil settlement? And what's the relationship of date to those?
Philip,
Anthony.
what you got for us, mate?
Well, we've got an incredibly impressive hole, I think, for what a morning's work.
Fantastic.
The only drawback is there isn't anything in it.
Oh.
Very little.
What, no evidence of cemetery, settlement or anything?
Doesn't look like it.
Oh.
You would have expected in a trench, what, 5 metres long and 3 metres wide, 15 square metres. If we were in the middle of a densely packed Roman cemetery, you'd get at least one burial.
But you've got no burials, no burial cuts.
We got no burials, and we appear to have no other earlier features either.
This empty trench is rather mystifying, because geophys results for this area show a mass of anomalies. But Phil thinks he's found the cause, a hard layer of natural iron. That sounds pretty metallic.
Iron pan.
Is that what's giving the geophysics signals then?
Well, I mean, I've already had a word with John Gator about this. I mean, I think it's important, very important, that he comes over and has a look at this.
So, is this just natural iron that's just lying in the
Well,
earth?
yeah, I mean, I suppose the problem is it the bottom of the sequence? Presumably you're going to cut through it, aren't you?
Got to, absolutely got to.
While Phil goes through the iron pan to see if there's archaeology underneath it, I've got a chance to visit the local primary school, which has become an unofficial museum of Ancaster's Roman past.
Over the years, members of the public, children have brought them into school. We house them here for the children's heritage and for the community to come and view the finds.
And one child's father got particularly
Yes.
passionate about it.
Right, so yes.
It's very fortunate the guy came along with William. Yeah.
What do you think of all this stuff?
Well, it's really fascinating because although we've got fairly standard Roman material right the way through the period, we've got 1st century brooches, 2nd century pottery and 3rd and 4th century pottery, we've also got these carvings of gods. There's a hunter god there, and this is the Roman goddess Minerva.
Do we know much about the Roman gods who are around here?
Well, the only one we've actually got a name for is Viridius. Now, he turns up on an inscription which was found a number of years ago underneath the church and records an arch that was dedicated to him.
What does Viridius mean?
Well, a little bit difficult to know, but the beginning bit probably means mighty or great. The end bit, Dios, not really sure.
Is it just Dios, God?
That's a possibility. So it might mean something like mighty God, high and mighty God, great God.
Guy believes Carenza's field could be a prime candidate for a temple or some other sacred site. And the finds trays are already overflowing with evidence of Roman activity, although Carenza hasn't even dug a trench yet. What we need now are some geophys results.
Ditches in black, magnetic survey, so cut into the ground, big pits as well.
But what about buildings?
Well, there may be a building as well in here.
Well, I think it's really exciting because what I've postulated about this whole area, because we've got this religious sculptures, that we may have a temple somewhere. Now look, you've got an enclosure and we've got a building that looks fairly isolated in the middle of the enclosure. That is exactly the sort of way a Romano-Celtic, Romano-British temple might have been set up.
Okay, but we need to do a bit more.
I think the sensible thing for the minute then is for us to get started with a trench across the ditch.
Okay.
If you can carry on and get any more detail on the building,
About the building,
that
yeah.
would help, because I think this, if it is a temple, we really need to get in at the building, don't
That's
we?
very important, yeah.
Yeah.
So Carenza's first trench goes in across the ditch of this potential religious site. Down in Phil's cemetery field, we've got a breakthrough. He's now managed to get under the iron pan.
Black sort of seems to be just underneath the iron pan, yeah.
It's beautiful sand, isn't it, eh?
Building the bigger picture of Roman Ancaster is now well underway, and Stuart's getting to grips with the effect the 3rd century wall had on this already well-established town.
So you're saying the town expanded well out, or was well outside these earthworks that
Pretty good
we see now?
indications that the town extended
outside these earthworks in all directions.
So it's quite critical in the way we understand this. I mean, I'm going to have to fight really hard, I suspect, so I'd like to have some geophysics in this area.
Well, it would certainly be very valuable, particularly inside the earthworks.
It's going to be hard work to get them out of there.
Did you manage to get under the iron pan, Phil?
We got some fascinating results, Tony. We've got this one, sort of an irregular area of burning there, and quite a circular area of burning there. But in the corner, we've got this area across here, sort of brownish stuff with a reddish edge, and then in here, this sort of regular square-ended thing like that. And in here, we had a massive pottery with big, hefty rims, and that's all underneath this panning. But to be quite honest, I haven't got the foggiest idea what it is.
What do we think that burning might be?
Well, the burning is really intense, and this so-called iron pan, it's really magnetic. There's lots of charcoal in it. So whether we've got metal working going on in this area and we've got bits of slag around, or whether we've got, I suppose, pyres from burning bodies.
Well, you have to get up to about 600 degrees C to burn a body, and that's pretty hot.
So it could either be something to do with the settlement then, or something to do with the cemetery.
Because presumably, well, we know that there is cremation burials being found in gardens around here. So if you've got an earlier cemetery, it's got to be a cremation cemetery. And they had to burn the bodies somewhere, so why not on the edge of the burial places?
With the possibility of this being the site of a funeral pyre, Margaret's keen to find out as much as possible about the Roman cemetery in this field. She and Mick want to dig a trench to the north of the modern graveyard where there may be burials. It's a proposal that doesn't exactly appeal to an overstretched John.
I can see where this is leading.
Yeah.
What do you mean, yeah?
Well, I think you need to have a look at it for us, please.
What else have you got to do?
Well, we're halfway through the new field. Stuart's talking about us going into the scheduled area as well.
Do we need to geophys before we dig on the northern side?
Oh, well, yes, I think you do.
So he really wants to do it, actually.
Change the tune.
Yeah, but it's a question of which we do. I mean, we ought to go in and survey that if you're going to dig in there.
What's the priority?
Well, I think that's a priority because there's some recording here, isn't there, Phil?
Yeah, and there's a bit more excavation too. I mean, there's still work to be done in here.
So Phil will continue to unravel the mysterious burning in this trench, while geophys return to the cemetery field to find a new target. But we're almost at the end of day one. A frustrating day for Phil, but a fantastic one for Carenza and her team in the wheat field, where the archaeology isn't just abundant, but surprising. Carenza, how's it been going?
Well, but we've had masses of human bone coming out. We're getting trays of it here. You can see the jaw there, very distinctively human. It's utterly bizarre though, because we've got this stony feature coming along here, which might be a ditch filled with rubble, or it might be a wall. We've got this feature coming along here, and you can see there's bones still in the trench. It's human bone, all jumbled up, not neatly laid out skeletons, and it's got animal bone mixed in with it as well.
Have you finished doing the geophys of this area?
Well, this is as far as we got before you stopped us. We've got this
Wow.
really amazing enclosure.
Now
Where
our
are
trench
we?
is just here, isn't it?
This is turning into a really strange site. In the cemetery we haven't found any bones. Where we thought there'd be habitation we've found hundreds of bones. And what about this thing here? Whatever could it be? Might it even be the temple which we hope might be here? Join us after the break. Beginning of day 2 in our search for Roman Ancaster, and at last it's stopped raining and the sun's come out, which is a big relief to everyone. Over there, beyond the church, Carenza's still grappling with this mystery of a confusion of animal and human bones apparently on top of a Roman building. And here, in the cemetery field, Phil's just walked away from the trench that he was digging all day yesterday beyond that big hedge in order to open another one. Phil, what's going on?
Well, actually, Tony, we're going to open 2 trenches.
Look, we've got the geophysics now, and you can see this fantastic ditch coming through here. But the thing is, we don't know whether it's the northern boundary of the cemetery or whether it's an earlier fort ditch.
An earlier Roman fort?
Roman fort, yes.
So why are we digging 2 trenches?
To actually undertake one big one might be a bit more than we can bite off. We'll put one in on that anomaly there, that dark area there, and also one across the ditch.
Yeah.
So we've laid in those 2 trenches. All we've got to do now is dig them.
What do you mean you've laid in them?
Well, we've located them. We've plotted them on the ground.
You
lay in a trench. That's what you do.
Well, I was only asking. Hopefully, these two trenches will give us more than just the edge of the Roman cemetery. We're looking for as much dating evidence as possible to help us unravel the 400-year history of Roman Ancaster.
Just make sure you got it flung back far enough.
We're particularly keen to discover more about what happened to the town when a wall was built around it in the late 3rd century. And from the air, Stuart may have found a clue.
I mean, one thing looking at it from here, Mick, is once you get over this ridge to the east, just how close you are to the Fenland.
Yes, it's very flat, isn't it?
And where the original Roman coastline was. So
Yeah.
you know, this actually is such a key position in the Roman hub of things that it's not surprising a town grew up here anyway, is it?
Yeah.
The walled town is actually quite small, isn't it? Compared to what we're looking at, which is a town which spread over onto that hill, huge cemetery areas out here.
But you see, I think the reason for that is that if you've got cemetery and occupation, and looking from here, look, it's going to go from where the church is, across the green field, out into the triangular field where we're digging, and then at some stage you have to provide some defences, then my guess would be that something that is actually across the road, that actually cuts off a piece of the road, which is that walled area does, is ideal if your job is to control the routes rather than to defend the whole occupied area, which you probably couldn't do. It's
That's
probably
right.
too big.
It's almost like a Roman toll booth in a way, isn't it? You know, you've got to go through it, haven't you?
Yeah.
So we may be getting an idea of why the town wall was built, but other aspects of this site continue to baffle. We thought we might have a temple in Carenza's field, but at the minute all we have are a series of mysterious burials.
What we've got in these trays is all adult bone. You've got this femoral head from the thigh bone.
Is that really human?
Yeah, this is human, although it's broken, so it looks a bit odd. And this is the top of a humerus, so the upper arm. And they're huge. I mean,
that's why I wondered. They're sort of cow-sized.
Yeah, well, you know, he or she was a very, very large person, whereas this person here, this is from the lower arm, this is the radius, in fact, comes from somebody who's fairly short, you know, or has at least got very short arms. So it's extremely unlikely that these come from the same person. This is a little bit of mandible from a male. Interestingly, though, for the Roman period, if that's what this is from, is that there is no disease on these teeth. They're quite worn, which suggests they're from an older person, but classically Roman teeth are actually quite bad. They could have quite refined diets with lots of sugars and carcinogenic foodstuffs, and you get lots and lots of decayed teeth.
So you're saying you don't think that's a Roman?
Well, it's a possibility that it may not be from a Roman person.
So this Roman site could have been later reused as a cemetery. Yet more proof of how Carenza's field's jam-packed with archaeology. But I don't think the same can be said of Phil's so-called cemetery field, despite them literally leaving no stone unturned.
A local chap was telling Kerry about it yesterday, so we said, well, you know, we've got to go and have a look. And it is the sort of thing you'd cover a sarcophagus with, isn't it? Well, it might be. You know, it's what I'd call a good piece of stone, even if I haven't got a use for it.
Is that what you'd call it?
Yeah.
I bet your back garden's full of those, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is actually.
What do you reckon, Terry?
It's not looking good, to be honest.
Ooh.
You're just teasing with your ooh.
I'm trying to build the tension.
In spite of Phil's almost desperate optimism, it does look like this is just a regular piece of stone. And as his second trench of the day goes in, there are rumblings of discontent over the amount of manpower being used in the cemetery. Because we could really use them to open up even more of Carenza's field, where there seems to be no end to the archaeology.
Can't see anything that's not human here. And again, Carenza, they're big people. You know, they're uncharacteristically Roman to see so many big... I'm not saying you never get a tall Roman, but these are all tall, big people.
Guy, what do you reckon's going on here?
Well, we've ended up with these damaged, disrupted bodies. That means there must have been an earlier burial.
When they weren't damaged, they were laid out properly.
Exactly. The question is, has the enclosure and all the other occupation debris we've got here, does that represent a cemetery area, or have we got a whole earlier occupation level before the cemetery? So that's the problem.
So I guess what we need to do is find out exactly what's going on here in this trench, why these burials are in there, and then look at the inner enclosure around that building as well. Do you think, Jeremy?
Precisely. At the moment, certainly in this trench, all we really understand is the final phase of activity. Continued excavation here and the new trench will really help us to understand what this enclosure was originally used for.
So we're putting a second trench across the centre of the enclosure.
So, 10-metre trench, bucket width?
I think, yes. Let's just start here, take it back 10 metres, should cover, go right across that area and just see what we hit.
Yeah.
With such a demand on our resources, this is probably our last chance to investigate Guy's theory that we may have a temple in Carenza's field, a theory partly based on the large number of religious finds discovered around Ancaster. The most striking was found in the grounds of Ancaster's church, which many believe sits on the site of a much earlier Roman temple. This unique inscription dedicates an arch to a mysterious god called Viridius. Why would he like an arch?
Well, something Victor's prepared is this lovely drawing of what might have been here on this site underneath the church. It's quite common for Christian establishments to be built later over a place that has a local tradition of religious worship. Here we've got temple, but an entranceway through an arch. Now, an arch in Roman religion, that period, it's a sacred passageway from one zone to another.
But we think we may have a temple further down the slope, don't we? Does that mean that there would have been lots of different religious places in the town?
It's certainly possible there'll be more than one religious place within the town, but it's also not uncommon to find religious centres immediately outside, particularly if they're along main roads.
But a Roman temple is also a kind of an entertainment thing. It's also a way of giving thanks for your journey. There may also be a hostelry, an inn association with it. So there's a lot of value to a Roman in having this kind of thing in a town, and a lot of passing trade that this kind of place can benefit from.
So this might actually have been the thing that was driving the town in its early years.
Exactly.
Good Lord. It's a big old piece of pot and it's well decorated, isn't it?
Yes, very nice.
Over in the cemetery, it looks like Phil and his team have at last come up with something.
Maggie, what on earth is that?
Well, I mean, this is shell-tempered ware, which is classic for the Iron Age in this area, and it's handmade, but it's got this very regular scoring, but very short scoring, and this is actually the shoulder. It's going to be a large storage job. Now the difficulty is obviously going to be the dating. It could be late Iron Age, but there's no perceptible change between the late Iron Age and the early Roman.
So we could be looking at a big area of settlement which extends into our trench on the south side of the modern cemetery.
Yeah.
And Phil's original trench has also now yielded evidence of early occupation.
All afternoon, we think we've got a kiln. We've got a concentrated area of burning up there, which is tapering off away behind me. And we think these may be the bases of pots.
What, these little round things?
Yeah, left from the last firing.
Blimey. Does this actually help with what you had on the geophysics?
That's brilliant. I mean,
right.
The whole point is, iron pan is not magnetic.
No.
Yet the iron pan we had...
That big block of stuff we were looking at yesterday.
It was really strong.
Yeah.
And I said there had to be some sort of fire going on here, sort of industrial process or a pyre. And to get a kiln, I mean, brilliant. It explains all the anomalies.
It now looks certain there was a settlement here in this part of Ancaster before it became a Roman cemetery. Very useful for our history of the town.
I mean, it may not push the story along, like, but it's still good archaeology.
Yeah.
But can we really justify keeping Phil and his team down here when we need more diggers up in Carenza's field? Mick, I don't understand why we're so obsessed with this cemetery field. We don't appear to have found any buildings, we don't appear to have found any burials, whereas on the other side, It's jam-packed with stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting really excited about
Yeah.
it. So why are we bothering to continue to look for the edge of the cemetery?
Well, I don't think we are. I think from what I've seen of these trenches now, we're at the position where we can answer a lot of that and say, you know, there is archaeology here, but there's not a huge amount of it.
Yeah, and what do you mean there's not much archaeology here? There's stacks of archaeology here.
Yeah, but in terms of the problem we've set ourselves, there's far more on the other side that we probably ought to be examining.
What were you tell me what the purpose of these trenches was?
To see whether there was occupation and the history of the town on this side of the enclosure.
Okay, we've answered that. We've got a lot of evidence of occupation over here. What else was the other object of it?
To find the edge of the cemetery.
Right. Now, I know we haven't found one yet, but where I'm digging at the moment, you've got a straight edge along there, turning round there and coming back there. It's aligned east-west. It looks like it's filled up with very loose, backfilled natural. Now, I don't know. That is very, very similar to the sort of fill you'd get in a grave.
Yeah.
It was a close scrape, but Phil buys some more time in the cemetery field. Up in Carenza's field, the new trench is coming along nicely.
Actually, it's quite a sudden line here.
While the decidedly non-Roman bodies discovered this morning are about to be lifted.
Just leave. Ooh. Oh dear. It's very fragile.
Can you just hold it on that side?
Yeah.
Might be able to
Hold it all together.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. Oh.
I think it's almost certainly a female because this is smooth and rounded and these are sort of medium in size and there's no really pronounced brow ridges or anything, so I think this is a woman. Wow. She's in very, very good condition, isn't she?
Yeah.
Well, no argument about that, is there?
Doesn't look like it, does it? Looks like a big coffin lid to me, that does.
So how will you excavate that once you've cleared all the loose and the rubble and stuff away from the top?
As always, define it. I mean, you know, we got the first part, we literally follow it back at that level.
I suppose what I'm really saying is, I want to know what's under that slab. How long will it be?
That's a much bigger job, isn't it? Because,
don't get too hasty. If this job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I mean, there's a lot of work involved here. Plus, you've got to remember, it is still a grave, and we got to show a certain level of respect for it. So it's not just a matter of ripping it out and lifting the lid off.
As Phil sets about the sarcophagus with renewed vigour, Carenza's discovered evidence of a building inside the enclosure.
So maybe we have got a wall foundation that's actually coming this way.
Straight through.
This, along with the evidence in Carenza's first trench and the field walking results, suggest there was a substantial suburb to the east of Ermine Street. But Stuart's now convinced this suburb dramatically changed when the centre of Ancaster was surrounded by the wall and two massive ditches in the late 3rd century.
But when you come down here, this is much more like the ditch was during the Roman period.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the size of that rampart there. I mean, it's been cut to a huge depth. Comes down, you've got this wide ditch that we're standing in here. Then in the middle, you've got this rampart.
Yeah.
Then beyond it, another ditch the same width as this. Then the rampart of the walled town, then on top of that you've got the wall itself. So this is a huge, huge construction.
That's taken an awful lot of town out if it came across here, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a massive construction.
It is.
Cool.
Tomorrow we'll dig a trench next to these defences in the hope they'll provide the final clues as to what happened here almost 2 millennia ago. But as day 2 draws to a close, Phil's now certain he's got an intact stone coffin. Although the news isn't all good.
Well, we've had the metal detector guy go over it and he
Yeah.
says there's a suspicion of a metal sounding underneath it.
Well, that isn't good news because that means there might be a lead coffin then, so...
What's that mean?
Well, it means there are all sorts of health and safety implications that we've got to think about.
Like what?
Well, for a start, you know, lead, it will oxidise, and the minute the stone is taken off, if the lead is oxidising, there'll be lead oxide in the air,
Right.
which you can't inhale because it's poisonous. But it also means that we'll probably get
what we call body liquor, which is from the decomposing tissues. And associated with that, you have to assume that the risk of biological hazards, which means we have to suit up and wear masks that are actually fairly sophisticated in terms of filtering out biological particles.
We got all that stuff,
We've got all of those, yeah. We came prepared.
I'm glad of that.
Have you ever taken the lid off of a sarcophagus before, Phil? Have you done it before?
No, I never have. It's kind of...
Do you find it an uncomfortable thought?
I feel differently to what I would with a normal skeleton. Even if you're in a grave, you kind of know that it's there and you just go down onto it and there's a body there.
Yeah.
But knowing that there is this stone container with a body in it,
it's quite awesome, really, isn't it?
I can't put it into words.
A reflective end to day 2 in the cemetery field. Thankfully, the opportunity of a game of cricket with the locals gives us all a chance to unwind and review the progress of our 2 sites. So how far did you manage to get, Corinza?
Well, we've got most of the bones out of the first trench, and the second trench is starting to turn up structures like floors and walls, it looks like. And of course we had that fantastic geophysics with all those new enclosures, and what we really wanted to do was put a couple of trenches into those new enclosures to find out what date they are and what's going on inside them. Now, when I spoke to you earlier, it was all, yes, we're going to put all our energies into that field, we're pulling out a cemetery field, and I've seen nothing since. I mean, have we still got the manpower for that?
I think we have, because there's a number of trenches in that field coming to an end anyway, where Kerry is, for example, so there'll be extra people.
Did you get as far as you hoped, Phil?
I think we got further than we'd hoped, actually. I mean, obviously the main effort got to be tomorrow to actually find out what's in that sarcophagus, the stone-lined coffin, really.
So tomorrow we've got a heck of a lot of work to do to try and sort out the story of Roman Ancaster, but I can't help admitting that there's a bit of me that really wants to see what happens when Phil lifts the lid of that stone coffin. Join us after the break. It's a sunny start to day 3 in Ancaster, and the latest geophys results from Corenza's field have revealed at least 5 more enclosures, suggesting our Roman suburb could be much bigger than we expected.
We've got to put a trench in somewhere and find out whether they're just farm areas or whether we've got perhaps industry going on here.
These definitely look industrial-like.
Right.
Perhaps if we could find a trench that would go across one of the ditches and into the interior.
Yeah.
So another trench goes in to judge the extent of occupation. While in Phil's cemetery field, which we were within minutes of shutting, we now have a stone coffin in one trench.
Yeah, let's go sort of middle for diddle-ish.
43.63.
And 2 further burials in the other trench, plus loads of vital dating evidence. We've a classic day of digging in prospect, until Mick drops a bombshell. I assumed, and I think everyone else assumed, that we were going to lift the lid of this sarcophagus first thing this morning, but now you're saying, well, I don't know.
Well, should we, and have we got the resources to do it? I mean, I think I need to be convinced about that.
Should we, Margaret?
Yes, I think we should. This is a different type of sarcophagus. It's not actually a sarcophagus, it's more of a kiss burial.
What do you mean it's not a sarcophagus, it's a kiss?
A sarcophagus is created out of one piece of stone. This is actually created out of slabs that form a sort of pseudo-sarcophagus. And so, as far as we know, there are none of those on the main cemetery site. Now, that makes this a very unusual type of burial.
How long is it going to take to deal with what's inside? Because that sounds like a big job to me.
It won't take very long to get the lid off because we've got the resources, and we've also got the resources to deal with what's inside, so I think we can do it today.
Do you want me to excavate that grave or don't you?
I think if Margaret's clear that there's good reasons for doing it and we've got the resources to do it, then we should go ahead, yeah. I mean, I just needed to be reassured about that.
You're reassured now?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
If we do have to suit up for a potential biohazard, the whole excavation process will become very time-consuming. So Phil decides to take a quick peek under the lid to assess the danger.
Let's go in. Yep. Get your hands underneath there. Well done. At the moment, no immediate sign of a lead coffin. So that, I'm sure, is a relief to all of us. Got it? Well done.
With the stone coffin declared a lead-free zone, it's all now down to fill.
Right, can somebody get me some digging tools? And I guess leave me to it.
Giving Mick and me a chance at last to catch up with the suburban sprawl in Carenza's field. Carenza, sorry, I nearly knocked you into the trench.
Yeah, well, I was a bit worried for a moment.
How exuberant he was there.
Yeah. I'm lost. What's been happening here?
Right over the far side, we put a trench across one of these little square enclosures because we were thinking they might be part of the settlement. But it looks at the moment as if they're actually paddocks because we're getting very few finds at all. It doesn't look
agricultural rather than town.
Well, we're getting no occupation,
That's
very
very
little
interesting.
pottery, so it looks like they might be fields, which makes, again, this enclosure that we're now standing in the middle of look, again, as if it's rather out on its own. So we put this trench right in the middle of this enclosure to try and find out what's going on in the middle of it, and we've got some really interesting stuff out of this. We have got a wall.
That's
See,
brilliant, isn't it?
not very deep, but it's well built and it's straight. Behind it, all that stone, what looks like rubble, is actually a cobbled surface. All the stones are laid in at the same angle.
So we've got some sort of yard or something out there.
Something
then?
like that, I reckon,
Right,
yeah.
right.
But that's all quite late, and a lot later than this end of the trench, because that wall is sitting on top of all this sandy, very humic sort of occupation debris in the trench here, and that's produced some fantastic finds. We've had masses of stuff out of it. You can see we've got trays of it. We've got a piece of Samian here, which has actually got a stamp on it.
Oh, crikey, that's good, isn't it?
So we should be able to get a good date on that. And we've got a lovely 1st century brooch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a nice find, isn't it?
But what's really interesting is it's very early.
Ah.
Finds like this brooch point to high status occupation here in the 1st and 2nd century. And then there's nothing for at least a couple of hundred years until this 4th century wall and floor, indicating a much later period of rebuilding. It now seems likely the 3rd century town wall had a lot to do with these two phases. Stuart certainly thinks so, backed up by John's massive survey of the field.
Filled in that area, Mick, there's the Roman town.
Yeah.
That's the wall and the ditch
Yeah.
coming through there. But the thing of real interest, that looks like a road coming out.
This could be a key area, couldn't it, in identifying that sequence. Was that road here when the town defences were cut, or is it a road that's put in afterwards to support this suburb?
The key thing, I think, is that if this road is chopped through, then that does actually give us that evidence that the construction of this fort disrupted the town.
So are you saying that this town wall would be a bit like the M25, that everything that was there before would suddenly be cut off?
Absolutely,
Or
yeah,
the
that's a
or the
potential.
Berlin Wall, you know, with streets coming up to it completely blank.
Yeah.
A trench across this possible road should give us the answer we need.
All we need is the metal surface and we can go home early.
But if the 3rd century wall and ditches did completely cut off this suburb, then it's highly unlikely the wall was just a decorative or status construction. There must have been a very good reason for such a drastic action. Is there any historic evidence which might explain why they put up this wall?
Well, the context seems to be that in the first part of the Roman period, we're on a boom roll. Towns grow and expand almost like wildfire. You know, there's little Iron Age settlements, and then a few decades later, there's sprawling towns. But in the latter part of the period, we start to hear about pirates raiding the coast, and the whole place seems to have become much more insecure.
But, Guy, we're miles away from the sea.
Well, not in Roman times. We're actually quite close to where the sea was, and the Romans in Britain have to throw up a whole series of forts all around the east coast and the south coast. Also, many of the Roman towns start to get walls, and it's possible that here at Ancaster we've got a place that's halfway between a town and a fort.
So are you saying that you think the specific reason these walls were erected was to protect the people inside from outside attacks?
That's right. Where we once had a much bigger town, I think people have pulled back to go within the walls. They've got protection there, a refuge. It may also house troops.
But presumably also it would have looked quite impressive.
That's one of the arguments, but I don't think, if you want to look really impressive, I think you'd throw up a bigger and flashier wall and you'd record the fact. What we often find with these town walls is that they're thrown up using any materials to hand. It looks a bit more panicky, particularly with this kind of place. It's much more businesslike, and it does enclose such a relatively small area. I think people had to put those up pretty fast.
What on earth is it? Oh, look, I know what it is. It's the palate.
There are no teeth.
Look, there, that's
what
right.
it is, isn't it?
There's the upper jaw.
Yeah.
There's the cheekbone. The eye, one eye is going to be in there, and that is the corner of the nose.
I've never ever seen a skull from this angle before, looking up through
It's
somebody's
weird,
cheekbone.
isn't it?
Although most of the attention in the cemetery field is now focused on Phil's stone coffin, the other finds are giving us a fascinating insight into the effect the 3rd century wall had on the sprawling town of Ancaster.
We've got a range of material really, because we're running from the late Iron Age into the Roman period, because these cream sherds are really from flagons, and they're very thin walled, and I would have said 1st century.
But how far through the Roman period can we go with the pottery?
So far we can go to about the mid-3rd century, because this is a Nene Valley folded beaker, and the fabric is really going to be mid-3rd and onwards. But what we don't have is anything that's positively 4th century.
But that's the date of the graves, isn't it?
Yeah. So it would suggest that the main activity in terms of occupation or whatever was going on pre the graves had actually ceased within the 3rd century.
Well, I'm quite excited about the Iron Age stuff, because I just wonder if there was indeed an Iron Age shrine or an Iron Age settlement. That's what attracted the Romans here in the first place. And maybe we've got a small town extending out across here, but falling out of use entirely when the walls go up at the end of the Roman period, and then perhaps the buildings completely disappeared, and that's why a cemetery ends up in the area.
The evidence from the two sites seems to be painting the same picture. The massive defences built in the 3rd century dramatically altered the town suburbs.
Hi Kerry, how's it going? Any sign of that road?
Yeah, we've got it up here, but unfortunately it's been cut by walls. We've got a wall here, and I've got the road from here to here.
Oh yeah, worn away cobbles, as it were.
That's right, and then it's been cut again by another wall. They're built on top of the road. The road itself is too small to be a main road, so we need to get underneath the cobbles to see if we can find some dating evidence.
Margaret, you know that stone with the groove in it?
Yeah.
It's inscribed.
Good Lord.
Look.
Can you make any sense
Well,
of it?
no, just give me time. There's a letter, there's a vertical there, and it goes round there. It looks like maybe an R. That's beginning to look almost like a V.
It is, isn't it?
And that, I don't know whether that's a big O.
This is beginning to look very similar to the inscription Guy showed me yesterday, and if it is, Phil's got a major discovery on his hands.
Stone of Crows.
D-I-O-V-R-I.
Well, I didn't expect that.
Margaret, I hear something's happened that makes it worth my while getting up this morning.
It's so exciting. You just wait till you come round this side.
Look, we've got this enormous slab of stone in here, look, and it's inscribed.
Oh, my goodness. It's to the god Viridius.
Who?
Yeah?
It's our god Viridius. We've already got an inscription. We've already looked at that. Tony and I have looked at that. It's been found 40 years ago. He's only known from one inscription in the whole country, from the churchyard in Ancaster. And here he is again. But, and this is the great thing for Time Team. The inscribed stone from the churchyard is not very well carved. That is top-grade Roman inscribed lettering. That's really classy, early 2nd century style. Do you see?
Fabulous.
Deo Viridio, to the god Viridius. So here he is again. He's the man.
God. Yeah, we thought it was good, but we didn't think it was that good, did we, eh?
It's top class. Top class.
Well, this is a turn-up for the books. But despite the intense interest in our Viridius grave, we haven't forgotten the other trench in this field. We've another burial which is also Roman, cut into an Iron Age ditch, so we know the Roman cemetery continues north. This grave is also a form of kist, although much less refined. Instead of the slabs used on Phil's grave, smaller stones were placed on top, and these seem to have eventually crushed the body. We're also beginning to build a profile of the man buried with the Viridius inscription. He was a survivor, a town elder who probably lived into his late 70s, but who'd suffered during his life.
This guy is walking around with 2 broken legs.
Yeah, he'd had 2 broken legs, hopefully for his sake, not at the same time.
Good Lord.
You see, you've got a lot of foreshortening there, which would have actually made quite a significant limp. Can you see?
Yeah.
Sort of lost about 1 centimetre on the right leg.
Up in Carenza's field, we're finishing off our story of our suburb. And the road trench dug this morning has now given us our final piece of dating evidence.
Maggie, we've had a piece of pottery turn up in the building rubble that is the foundations for the structures either side of the road here. Can you tell me what date it is?
Well, It's one of these storage jars. So really you're looking at 1st century running into the 2nd century. About 120-ish should be about it.
Right. What seems to be happening, I think, is that we've got, very soon after the Roman conquest, we've got settlements sprawling all along the road here, possibly from right over there, to our big enclosure, which might have a shrine or a temple in it or something. Next point at which we've got any idea of what's going on in this field at all is mid-late 3rd, because there's no later pottery at all here. So it's as if when the town defences are built, the settlements retreated behind there, left this area unoccupied, but the enclosure in the middle there is the focus activity at that date, so that's still in use. And by the later 4th century, it's being used for burial.
So it now seems the town wall killed off this suburb in its original form. But how does that help us work out why the wall was built? It's at times like this you turn to Stuart.
There's clearly a settlement of sorts in the late Iron Age around here, which the Romans, in effect, reoccupy and use. And we seem to have evidence from the excavation up on the trench by the rampart, Mick, of a possible road coming in down here as well.
A road there now, yeah.
So we have a picture of a kind of a spread-out settlement, concentrated alongside the road, but by the time the walled town goes in, you get a very different perspective on it. You could switch over, Neil. The big earthwork ditches that were put around it, they basically just chop away. They dig out almost, a good half of the town disappear there. And
so the red stuff is actually the area that was encased by the wall.
That's right.
And then the stuff between the red and the yellow is what?
It's just gone. It's being dug away.
It's just ditch.
Yeah.
But it's ditches where there was town, isn't it?
Yeah. And the area that formerly was settled out down here...
It's disappeared.
That's gone. That's, in fact, just used as a cemetery area.
It's cut off, isn't it, from the rest of the town?
Entirely, yeah.
It's incredibly brutal.
Oh, it is. I mean, it shows just how determined they were to formalise this settlement. Now, they must have had very, very important reasons for doing this.
Sounds like a decision from the top, that does.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, kind of bureaucracy type of thing.
Yeah. It looks like the wall around Ancaster was built on the orders of Roman central government to defend this strategic town, irrespective of the effects on the local community. And from his topographical research, Stuart thinks he may have found the origins of the god Viridius.
There's a very important spring site here. Now, I think in relation to dedications and gods and so on, we have a religious centre here in the Iron Age, and as we know from many other sites, such sites are used again and again in the Roman period. And look at the proximity of it to this big Roman settlement here. I think that, in essence, we've got a major religious shrine centre there.
So, Mick, it might not be fanciful to think of Viridius as a pre-Roman god associated with that spring who just kind of lasted.
That's right. I mean, often the Romans take over Celtic gods and incorporate them into their own pantheon.
We've done much more than find out why Ancaster's wall was built. We've discovered the grave of an elderly man who as a boy may well have witnessed its construction. And this fantastic time team dig has culminated in this rare inscription to the god Viridius, the only one ever discovered inside a grave.
I mean, every so often we find something on Time Team which you know is going to go straight into the textbooks, and this is one of those occasions.
And what is the orientation of this kist?
It's east-west, head to the west.
So does that mean he's Christian then?
Well, it's very interesting. It seems to me we have two possibilities here. Either this chap is not sure whether he's Christian or pagan and he's hedging his bets, or the one I like better is that he's really a pagan, but he's buried in a Christian way, but his friends know he's a pagan, so they put this stone in right next to his head with his god on it.
But isn't there a third possibility, which is that it's just a coincidence that he's using recycled material that just happens to be the god's name?
I think it's too obvious that the inscription is still there. I think they would have turned it round and hidden it if he was really a Christian and they were just reusing the stone.
Actually, Mick, as I'm clearing away the bones here, there's actually traces of a lower layer of lettering. Got it?
Yep, we've got it. There we are.
Can you make anything at all from that?
I've got all the information I really need here, because as well as the top line and the S and the A, I can see the top of the letter N, and then the top of the letter C, and the little N there that probably is a T. The word's going to be sancto. It's to the god Viridius, the Holy One.